for you. If you don't know him or have heard of him, you will after this for sure. He's in the performing arts, and he's toured with Phis. He's been a trapeze artist for 37 years. He's written a book about his mom who was going through dementia, and we'll definitely talk about that. He sets up Broadway shows. He's been cruise lines. He's a comedian as well. So, coming from you from New York City, we got Mr. Bobby Hedgeland Taylor. Bobby, welcome. Thanks so
Yay.
much.
Hey, welcome, Bobby.
Thank you for having me. So this is Kermit the Frog and Eric Cartman introducing me. Okay, so coming to you live from Astoria, New York, Bobby Hedgeland Taylor. Fuck you, Frog. Anyways, goddamn hippies, goddamn fish loving hippies. Where's
Fish
Taylor when you need him? Respect authority.
You got some cheesy poofs over there with you?
Sorry.
Oh,
I work with kids a lot, so I woke up this morning and I was just like, I'm exhausted from dealing with children all week, but they also are little disease-ridden carriers, so I'm sure I caught one of their bugs this week. So so my voice and my impressions are not quite warmed up, but we may throw some more in there.
Pretty good.
Oh, thank you so much. Cartman is my favorite. He always is a crowd pleaser when I do stand up, and so he's usually one of the first voices I throw in, depending on what I'm doing, and that's been really good because you want to. One of the things, no matter what you do, is you catch the audience's attention, and like Dolly Parton always said, make them laugh, make them cry, scare the hell out of them, and send them home. And so that's like, okay, that's what I'll do. So,
yeah. Have you seen Dolly Parton lately? She definitely got to scare the hell out of you.
Hey,
poor lady.
She's
Dolly
we'll cut that out,
buddy. Dolly
we'll cut that out anyways.
We're gonna edit that shit out. No, nobody disses Dolly.
No, that's right. Nobody.
That's right.
So that Cartman was awesome, man.
Anyway.
Thank you.
You should think about having them argue each other and tell Cartman he's going to give Kermit some poison cheesy poos. He keeps that shit up.
In my act, there's a little moment that they argue together, so it's actually kind of funny. And the thing is, so the reason I started to do stand up was after 37 years of being a trapeze artist. I had hip replacement, so I wasn't sure I was going to able to. I can't perform at the intensity I used to. I'm back to doing some aerial stuff, but it'll never be Madison Square Garden with Phis. Those days are over. So
wow.
Stand up has always been in my ether, and I used to do stand up in the 90s and the early 90s actually, and it was sort of my jam. It wasn't my jam. I didn't have a gimmick, and it was sort of like I was still trying to find where I belonged, and I was still pushing, still working as an actor, and yet still working in Las Vegas as an aerialist. So I was bouncing all over the place. But I was in LA, and I was working on it, but it didn't feed me, as an artist. Like you want your art to give, you want something from your art back. You want, like, you're creating this, and it just wasn't there yet. And it started in 2017 when I started going back into stand up. I'm also a wedding officiant. That's one of my other hyphenations. And one of the weddings. Yes,
Bobby,
sir.
You need to get off your ass and do something.
I know, really. It's really. I'm just really.
You know what?
I'm so fucking lazy. It's ridiculous.
Sitting around doing nothing. Yeah. I mean, you make everybody else that has one job. We kind of feel bad.
I am the king of the side hustle. I will tell you, I have always been. And when you live in New York, what is our slogan? If you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. Which is true, because you have to be able to turn on a dime and make money doing whatever it takes.
Oh yeah.
And there's some things that I'm not proud of, but hey, that we won't talk about that. But anyway, it's like, but you have to make money, and you have to find ways to make yourself marketable in any market. And even just becoming an author for the first time, I never set out to be an author. The pandemic kind of said, hey, you know what? You can't do anything but sit at home. You've been wanting to write that book. Your mom just passed away. let's write a book. So it's like I'm always going to be an artist, and that's why people always say you're multi hyphenated. I always get, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I'll take it, but you're always going to have you're always going to need to express yourself artistically somehow. And I doing this wedding in 2017, the bride was a friend of mine, and she gave me like 8 pages of provisos for this wedding, and I was like, Jesus Christ, okay. um so I had to share the officiating duties with their friend Tanya, which was fine. I've done that before. Then we had to dress as Sonny and Cher. I'll give the millennials a second to Google Sonny and Cher.
Yeah, I would
um,
say that. Yeah.
and we had to sing "I Got You, Babe" live. It's probably not on Spotify, millennials, but you can
Wow.
find it. But we had to sing "I Got You,
Wow.
Babe" live at Sonny and Cher to open the ceremony. We even used the Sonny and Cher theme song to walk out. So I was like, okay, I've never done this before, but what the hell? Why not? At first, they were like, oh, you can just lip sync it. And I was like, no, I don't think so. I think this is something we ought to try. So we went to a coach. Christina Bianco is her name. She's one of the best impressionist coaches out there, but she's also still in the game. She's working in London a lot. You'll see her on YouTube. She's been on every talk show doing virtually the same thing that I do. And so she encouraged me. She talked me through different placements of the voices. And so we did the wedding, and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with singing in other people's voices. And then I started to explore, well, how do I make this my own? And different songs, like I use "Never Gonna Give You Up" by Rick Astley, because when in the 80s, I always got people would always say, "Oh my God, you look just like Rick Astley."
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, they also
Yeah.
used to say I look like Danny Bonaducci, which is not a compliment. Okay.
Oh, I'm glad I didn't say nothing because yeah, I could see that too.
If I could reach for the screen right now, yeah, slap the shit out of you, hippie. Goddamn hippies, slap that bitch. Um, right. So I
Dude,
throw
stop
it
right
in
now. Stop right
because it's
now. Stop right.
right.
That's
I'm the
not even
same.
in a
I'm the same
genre.
way. Yeah, I'm the same way, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's like like we're saying, like when you're in the arts, it's okay to listen to rap, to reggae, to country. My dad was a country and western guitarist, so I grew up with a lot of country
Wow.
music. So it's like it's okay to explore what the new country is like, or different rap artists that are out there who have something to say. And there's ways to find your own scope of what you like as just there's nothing wrong with listening to the pop music of today, and nothing wrong with listening to Elvis Presley. And that's
Right.
another one. Elvis is always in my act too, because he's an easy one to do. But it's like um but those kind of things, like, it for me as an artist, it helps me hone my stand up, so that it doesn't have to be the same set every night, because depending on where I'm
Yeah.
performing, nobody knows me. They don't know what they're getting. So I'm going to give them what I have, and then if it's something that they connect with right away, it's like bang, you've won them over. And also,
Right.
because I do the impressions, I stand out among all the other stand-ups that are up and coming right now. And I'm still like, I'm not making the big bucks in stand-up. I'm just starting to get resort bookings, which is nice. But they're small, you know what I mean? So it's nice that the local stand-up community is sort of, I'm sort of getting my way in here and there. I'm doing these variety shows here and there, but the bigger, more established stand-ups that are out there, I'm not there yet. I'm not even
Hmm.
close to being there yet. I'm not even close to having my first 1 hour special. But that's not unattainable at this point, because I mean, obviously writing 2 books and having that much material about my crazy family, which is what everyone wants to hear with and connect with. And that's why my book is so popular, is because it crosses a line where people can identify with, oh, my dad was like that when he had dementia,
Hmm.
or oh, my mom used to do this funny
Right.
thing, or she used to say this funny, she used to flirt with the nurse or something. So those ways, anybody in, I call myself a boomer, but I'm more of a, I guess, a Gen X. I don't know where I don't know how they break it down by, your age or your penis size. I don't know what they're telling you about. Anyway, um, but I call myself a boomer, and and if I can connect with other cranky boomers who grew up in the 70s and 80s, who have this connection to the arts, then I've won. And that's all it's about. It's about
Right.
finding the connection to to the popular, to pop culture. And also, like, pop culture has to span rather, many different eras. So that's why I try to listen to as much music as possible. But it was
Right.
that first wedding that got me back into it. Um, and that's one thing I did. I think it was 1990 or 1991. I was working at a supper club, ended up working with Phyllis Diller, and it was one of the most amazing things I've ever experienced. She was one of the sweetest people, but she was also very hard nosed. And watching her and her delivery and the way that because she walked in, she was in jeans and a t-shirt, dark glasses, and a bucket hat. And then she puts on that whole persona backstage. And when the door opens from her dressing room, Phyllis Diller emerges, and that it's like she created this entire character from the ground up. And listening to her nowadays and looking back at interviews, how she created that persona was
Wow.
magical. So
Yeah, I was going to ask
anyway,
you. You said you started and then kind of left, but you started
yeah,
in like the early '90s. You must have worked
right
with
after.
you must have
What
worked
was
with a
that?
lot of you must have worked with or been around a lot of comics that came out of that era.
I did, but it was never, you know, I mean, if Seinfeld was on the bill, no one knew who he was, so no one cared. So,
Right. Well, yeah,
but
exactly. Yeah,
it was also, I mean, but I can't even tell you the other comics that were there because it was so brief. And it was right
yeah,
after working with Phyllis. Then I moved to LA for a short period of time. And I thought, oh, I'm going to do, blah, 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 blah. And it just didn't land. When I lived in
yeah.
LA, nothing landed. I did some extra work and nothing landed. And I was homesick. And I really did not like living in LA at that time. I'm not one for earthquakes. That's not my thing.
Now, now,
When
now, now,
when you're
now
sitting on the couch and you watch a crack go across your ceiling,
oh yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah. Forget about that.
yeah.
Forget
So
about that
so
now.
I could, like, there were, if anybody who was in the game back then is probably very successful right now, or they've
Okay.
left it and
Yeah.
gone on to other things. But like, that time period was, like I said, it was so jarbled for me. It was post 80s. It was
Hmm.
trying to figure out, it was the post AIDS crisis as well. It was like there was a shift in the AIDS crisis. So there was a very different thing happening to the entertainment industry in New York City. So there were a lot of different paths to be taken. So I was really trying to find, where I belonged, but I kept getting more work in the circus world and in the trapeze world, but mostly doing nightclub work. And that was my
Wow.
favorite because I could live at home. I didn't have to travel. I go, take the train or a cab to work, and I could make my rent in one weekend. And yeah, doing the
Wow.
nightclubs. And that's how trapeze artists in New York. There were only six of us that started in the. There were two of us that started in the '80s, and the rest started early mid '90s, and there was about six or seven of us by mid '90s, and then it exploded
I'm
after
saying,
that.
yeah.
Now you triple
Talk about
person.
that. How did you go from stand up to
Yeah,
trapeze artist? You,
you don't get a red
you know, this is a very awkward, but you're fired, Corey. Sorry.
dot. No, so to go back, so I was born, and then what happened is, basically, I moved to New York in the early '80s, and I went to theater school. Started as a ballroom dancer, that was my thing. And becoming an artist at that time, the only place we could go that was anywhere where you could be quote unquote discovered. I'm still waiting on that, by the way. Not gonna happen. it was to New York, and I was a Pennsylvania kid, so it was only an hour and a half to the city. So it was a natural thing, and I was like, I can't just pack up and move to New York. I don't know anybody, I don't know anything. But then I got into theater school here, and I got a full scholarship to the American Musical and Dramatic Academy. So I came to the city with that in mind, and I was already been working here, doing dancing gigs. There was a restaurant called Mama Leone's, and my ballroom partner and I would drive from Pennsylvania to New York, and we'd perform in the Mama Leone's restaurant. They used to have an orchestra in the basement, big dance hall, and we would dance whatever the orchestra was playing, and then we get people up to dance with us, and we made $50 a night, and that was like the early '80s, and I mean $50 a night was a lot of money back then. So
Right. Oh yeah.
gas was cheap. It was even cocaine was cheap back then. So it was like
Wow.
so we made it back and
back
forth.
in
It was
my
record
day.
time. But so then shortly after there, I got a job, and I was working in a bar in between shows slash that, like I said, you have to have a side hustle when you're doing performing arts,
Mm-hmm.
because you everything's temporary. Musical theater, concerts, they're all temporary. Tours don't go out for endless times. You don't get rehired all the time. So um, you had to have something to fall back on in between the art. So in between, I would bartend and coat check at a bar downtown called Uncle Charlie's. And one night I was in the coat check. This gentleman came up to me, started talking to me, handed me his coat, blah blah blah. We started chatting. So he was producing a circus musical called The Circus Adventures of Toby Tyler. And it's an old Disney film from 1960. And I basically, he wanted me for that part. So I went in, I auditioned, I got it. And then they sent me to a circus coach. And there was only one trapeze artist in New York. She's still alive, but she is, again, another person with dementia who doesn't know me. But but her name was Irina, and she took me under her wing. And she was a Ukrainian Olympian trapeze artist, and she taught me the ropes, so to speak. And within 6 months, the show itself never got off the ground, and Disney pulled their funding, and it just never happened. But I fell in love with it, so I kept going back for lessons, and I just fell in love with it. And then within a year, I was doing nightclubs. I was traveling to Vermont to train with these high level acrobats. Then the school opened in San Francisco, and I moved to San Francisco to train at that school. And then we all started getting work in all different venues. Smaller shows that used to tour in the southern states, we call them mud shows, but they were like single ring circuses, and
Mm-hmm.
they would play county fairs. They would play, we call one nighters, sometimes three nighters. You park the tent on a Thursday. The show is Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You pack up on Monday, and you're into the next town by Tuesday. So it it
Wow.
was it was a it was an adventure. And as an actor, I was making minimum what an actor was making back in the '80s and '90s, a couple $100 a week, and that was a lot back then. A call to work in Las Vegas, I was offered 1,500 a week, working 7 minutes a day, and I thought,
Wow.
theater.
Yeah. Let me see. Let's do the math on this one. Yeah.
Yeah, so I ended up popping into Vegas and working at Circus for a little while, and working at the other casinos, the Flamingo Hilton. And then I got involved with acrobatic companies. There was one company that was up and coming in New York called Anti Gravity. And so I started doing gigs with them. So it started to morph itself into something totally different. But I only did that one show with Phyllis, as I worked at the supper club that she was performing at. And then I started doing stand up because I thought, oh, that's my next trajectory.
Mm.
And it just landed like a fart in an elevator. It was not, it just wasn't, I wasn't ready. I'm funny by nature, but I'm not funny. I wasn't funny by, this is a joke and I am writing you a joke right now, and
Mm-hmm.
and here's the punchline. So when you're doing stand up and working those moments, now I understand, because I've had the life experience, but I've also understood the way to tell a story is very different than my, you know, 30 something year old self was doing back then.
Right.
So So again, that is how that's how that period of time just sort of morphed into itself. And then by the end of the 90s, I was on tour / working in New York / living in San Francisco. And then I did, speaking of accidents, I did have a trapeze fall. I don't like to talk about it much, but it was about 20 feet. I
I
broke
know.
my wrist and my elbow, my jaw, and it was in Dallas, and it was not fun, and it was my own damn fault.
See, that's what
Um,
it was. You were in Texas. I mean, and
yeah,
that right
that's it.
there is never good. That's never good.
Screwed it up. Yeah, I believe it was a convention center, and it would have been yeah. And so that it was like 25 years ago. And like I said, I don't like to talk about it because when you fail at your art so miserably that you get injured and you could have died,
Oh
it
yeah.
affects you. So in general, though, after that experience, obviously take care of yourself, take care of your rigging, but also remember your own safety protocol. Um, I had a safety belt, just wasn't wearing it, and because I was cocky and I was like, oh, I'm just warming up, and that's when
Mm-hmm.
that's when the shit happens. That's when the shit hits the fan, and
Now,
it changed my career completely because not only do you now have a not only do you have not have your art anymore, but now you go back into your art with this deep rooted fight or flight fear of your
mm-hmm.
safety, and that changes everything. And it's the same, and
Right.
it's almost the same experience post hip replacement, because I did have hip replacement in 2021, with, like I said, which changed my career again. And what that does, though, is it changes your career to the point where you are somebody banging on your door.
Come
uh,
in.
uh, oh, oh, okay. Oh no, I was just like I can't. I was like, I keep hearing this noise. It's all good.
So so
No, but my
that
point is
that
that it changes you. It changes you forever, and it changes your limits as to what you're able to really push yourself and the intensity you're able to push yourself with.
right.
So
Well, that brings up a question, because like I said, this is a quote unquote safety podcast, but I mean, we're having a lot of people that aren't actually in safety. But that right there, does before your accident, were there any kind of like what we call SOPs, kind of like check the rigging, and here's your list of check this first, check this one, check this before you even
yeah,
get up that high.
of course, and but that was your personal check-in. When you
Okay.
do, when you're a self-contained act, you put yourself in there, you put yourself up,
Mm-hmm.
you rig your, unless they have a rigging company come in to put stuff in for you,
Yeah.
put your crane bar up, depending on what that is. Um, you know, I for me, it was really a what's the word I'm looking for? It's an ego. It's a hit to your ego, because what if that was somebody else and I was in charge of them?
Oh
What
yeah.
if I was, you know what I mean? And you know, when you're younger and cocky, and you think you're invulnerable,
Right.
and that just was like I said, I don't like talking about it. It was traumatic.
Yeah.
It happened, but
Yeah.
I also, you grow from it and you change. You grow and you change, but you also change your you change your checklist.
Mm-hmm.
I now whenever I'm doing any kind of rigging, it's always good to have a second set of eyes on
Oh yeah.
everything, especially where
Yeah.
rigging's concerned. Um,
And like we
you
say,
know, this was what we call an industrial, where you're hired as a sole proprietor act. You come in, you set up your equipment, you do your act, you take your stuff down, you leave.
mm-hmm.
But now it's like there's many teams involved, there's many people involved. um, and when you think of work with me now, there are only a certain number of them in New York right now. And there are people that I trust, and I trust them implicitly. And
I mean, you have to, yeah.
yeah, exactly, exactly. If you don't bring, I mean, first you bring your experience because you're the act. But what people don't realize, those 7 minutes that you're in the air, it's not just about 7 minutes. It's about the training, the, your hour warm up, your costuming, your rigging, your safety check, your safety belt, all of those things. And, when you have, if you have a team, that's great. They come with you, they work with you, and that's how it happened. But this was not that. And it was, like I said, long time ago. And, uh, you know, I honestly don't remember the day because
Yeah.
I was in the
Well, and
hospital
that's
for
something
most of it.
that, Corey and I, being safety managers, we really preach to our guys. It a split second, we have older guys that say, hey, I've done this for years and nothing's ever happened. And it's one of those, all it takes is like just a blink of an eye, and all of a sudden you have
Yep,
a bad story to tell. And
exactly. And also learning about rigging was really important at the time because, don't forget, circus was never meant to be a popular culture thing. It was never meant to be for the general population. Circus families were the only ones that were doing it. You were born into a
hmm
circus family, you
right.
learned an act, you performed the act, and then your entire family went on the road and made money to buy a house for the oldest person in the troupe. And when that person passed, the next person moved into that house. And then you bought land so that you could have multiple acts rehearsing in the backyard.
hmm
So it was very much a completely insular event.
right.
And so when I knew that I was going to take it on, I had to surround myself with the best people.
hmm
And I had to surround myself with people who knew what they were doing. And I still have wonderful friends from the circus family world because they were willing to share their art with us. It was not usually done.
hmm
And me as a performer, I'm always uh, safety first. I always say safety third as a joke, but honestly, when you look at it, is the audience safe?
yeah, yeah.
Is the audience safe? Is the crew safe? Are you safe? So
hmm
safety third. And, so I always make sure that I am, double and triple checking things. And now that I run a school, it's like I'm not a parent, but I am parental. And
hmm
there's nothing that goes through me like when a kid gets injured.
right.
And, you know, knock wood, where's some wood? Um, Nothing catastrophic, which has been great, but
Well,
it's still, it's, well, again, it varies what job I'm teaching, but a lot of summer camps start at like 6 years old. I've taught, I've taught kids uh, on tightrope. I've taught kids as young as 3 years old how to walk a tightrope.
wow.
Uh, but it depends on the insurance. It also depends on who's paying for the insurance, and it really depends on what the goal of the space is. Are we trying to train this child for the circus? Probably not. Are we trying to give them a fun adventure? Maybe. So it's all that, like
hmm
it's all about who's ultimately responsible for the equipment and things like that. A lot of the circus camps that I've worked at that are outside of New York, you come in as an aerial specialist. They have a rigger who does rigging for the school or the location, um, and then you come in with your expertise, and a lot of times the teachers perform for the kids. So whatever we're teaching them, we're doing like a give and take with that.
Yeah.
But for the most part, you always do a visual inspection of the equipment regardless of who puts it in. You always go up and look at what, and you ask questions. Any rigger worth their salt is going to answer every single question,
hmm
and that's because they have nothing to hide. They didn't guess. They did everything calculated. Like now, every bit of equipment that I own is steel and comes from the United States. I don't buy externally sourced materials. And this is just personal, but I don't trust the way that it's forged in different countries.
Mm.
So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yes, bingo. I had, and I wish I still had them, but I had two uh, China shackles that were interlocked, and they were in part of a rigging system, and they had worn down to the point that they had worn halfway through because the way it's forged. I
Mm-hmm.
went through all my equipment. I removed everything, especially the China shackles. Show up in my rigging bag. I'm like, I don't know the source of these. I don't know if I should use them. I'm going to use them for non-bearing weight. And I looked, and they're quick links, so they were fine for like holding something that's non-human weight. You know what I mean? Like I have a whole bag of that stuff.
Right.
But then I looked and I was like, oh, China, nope, we're throwing that away.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
And it's like when you do that, like when you do any kind of rig inspection for your personal equipment, especially circus equipment, you have to understand the difference between the braking strength, the difference between what is the failure strength, what is the
Mm-hmm.
manufacturer's failure strength, because they're very different. The manufacturer is going to say, we're in this bracket right here. But when it actually fails, it's out here. So you're looking at stuff and you have to make educated guesses. If something is 26 kilonewtons, I'm probably not going to break it. But if you put it in the wrong stress situation, it's very
Right.
possible. But I'm not putting somebody into a situation that I can't answer every question and be and say, like this is, and that's really important when you're going. And also, like, when you go into a different situation. I went into a theater because I do a lot of theater where most musicals nowadays that use circus, I get called in to do stuff like Pippin and Chaplin, these musicals here. I mean, the ones I did on Broadway. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and when you do them outside of the New York area, there's always some crusty guy named Smitty, who's who's in charge of rigging, and then he's got this real creative
Ah.
thing, and I'll never forget it. It was brilliant the way. Well,
Yeah.
this one was interesting because when I looked at it, I thought this is really creative for what he did, but it's also like I don't know why he created it this way. But he took solid steel chain and he strung cable through the chain, and then he made a ball at like this giant ball, and with one cable coming out of the ball, and drilled a hole in the floor with supported it on both sides with steel, and so it was I was just like, I've never seen this done before ever. So I'm like, I don't know if I but it was sort of like when they say if you can't tie a knot, tie a lot. So you know it was that
um,
kind of a scenario because it was clear this guy had rigging knowledge and he wanted to have like as many redundancies in place as possible. And so it was just this ball of chain that was woven together with wire. So it was literally a giant ball, which you could have done with any chunk of steel. You could have had a rock, like you could have gone out and
right.
it
Yeah.
literally was just like this weird kind of way of
Yeah.
supporting.
Cannonball.
Yeah, it was just something so bizarre, but in its way it worked, and it did. I've never seen this before, so I have no idea what this is. But I looked at it. It was for a static point, for a static rig, for an aerial fabric, for a 80-pound performer. So it also had redundancies that went up to steel girders. So even if anything failed in that little ball, it still was supported by cable. So I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything wrong, but I didn't see anything right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it just looked so bizarre that somebody would do this to make, as a rigging point. Like, here, I'm going to turn my camera for a second here. So this is me at Burning Man. I don't know if you can see that, but that's a carabiner, swivel carabiner, and then aerial fabric. That's me there. And that's
Hmm.
this is at Burning Man. Yep. Yeah, it was amazing. And if you're into rigging, you get to see a lot of it out there, and you get to see a lot of bad rigging, but you also see a lot of really cool rigging. Um, because they have these giant art structures that we have. There's 80-mile-an-hour winds out there, so you get in the middle of a dust storm, you can't have a 100-foot statue fall over. So it's the mechanics and the engineering is incredible out there. Um, but
Wow.
yeah, I've been to Burning Man 10 times. I was supposed to go this year, but I can't go. Um, but the rigging is that rig in particular from Burning Man is your regular teepee rig, but it's 4 legs and it's got a crane bar and it's anchored into the ground. And then on top of that, it's guy wired out, but it's all static load. It's not dynamic load.
Hmm.
So if you're throwing dynamic load into that, you got to be careful about what you're doing. And what this theater was doing, they were not doing dynamic load on that point. So well, my point is that you can see extremes. And then I walked into certain theaters where I said, okay, if we're gonna use the batten, it needs to be guyed out into 4 directions. They already had that designed and knew exactly what I was talking about. And um, that's the kind of stuff that makes my life easier when I walk into it.
Oh yeah, for
But
sure.
oh man, but
Wow.
I have one picture to show you. So in explaining how rigging works for the concert world. So in the Phish concert, we each had our own rig that was computerized. So we were connected to one. We were each connected to one point, computerized, and has an immediate fail, which moves 18 feet per second. So um, all of that to be said, we each also had our own safety person who clipped us in, who made sure that we were in the safe position before the performance
Hmm.
happened. So if you look here, so this is me right
Wow.
there, and there's the rigging that went up there, and this was we had these tails of silver with us, and this is you can watch this on YouTube. It's on YouTube, and then we were in these aerial nets. So so if you see all these are nets. So that's me. Um, and So we each had our own safety. We had signals. So if we did this at any time, they brought us down immediately. We had very specific ways to communicate with safety, and that's
Wow.
the difference nowadays because there's so much. Um, we live in a litigious society, and everybody wants to sue everybody.
Hmm.
So with a band like Phish, who has, not only are they worried about the band, they're worried about the crowd. So everything, and then the performer, like I said, safety third. So, um, so when it comes down to those elements in a rock concert, it is meticulously looked after,
Hmm.
and the difference between doing your own rigging in a nightclub and or a convention center and getting hurt and doing rigging at Madison Square Garden. Two totally different worlds, but you learn from the Madison Square Garden
Oh
people
yeah.
really fast on how to make sure that everything stays in alignment. Finally, OSHA steps in. And yes, they're not, not everybody's perfect, but there are times when they have to revisit antiquated laws. And, like in New York, if you are an aerialist and your body is performing over 20 feet in the air, you must be tethered, sandbag or a live person, or you're tethered to your apparatus. Any of that. Like, and then there is a huge team, like every Phish concert in Madison Square Garden. That safety team, that pyro team comes in and they meticulously look at every element in the concert. And, that in itself is different because the product that you're protecting is a band.
Hmm.
When it comes down to construction work, look at the Titanic. Go back that far. A lot of men died on the not on the Titanic, but building the Titanic. because safety regulations in the turn of the century weren't in place and workers were expendable. So they
Mm-hmm.
didn't spend. We live in a litigious society. A month ago, we had a crane catch fire in New York and fall over the top of a building, injuring people. That happens more frequently than you think.
Wow.
And it just depends on how, how universal it is. It depends on who's holding the purse strings, honestly. And that's really, the thing that I've noticed, the difference between a construction site and a theater. There's not much difference when it comes to the elements of what your goal is. Construction site, your goal is to get the cement poured and the building raised. In a theater, you're getting the cement is this is the show that we want to entice the audience to give us money for.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to repeat that 8 shows a week, or we want to repeat that this many concerts a year. So if you think about, that's the cement. So we're pouring the cement, and then every element that goes along with that makes sure that every component is safe. On Broadway and Broadway theaters, there's a head carpenter, there's a head electrician, and each theater has its own in-house person that takes care of that stuff. So in general, those are the people that have your back, and they take care of your safety. Also, if you have automatic flying, there's still somebody off stage, a stagehand who's in charge of your safety, who is taught this is how your harness works. This is what how we. And when I work with people, like I just did the cover of Harper's Bazaar magazine, and where we had models who have no upper body strength. Just put it out there. They don't know how to hold their body up, so they're not going to be hanging on a trapeze. So we had them in harnesses and cables, and the photographer had to take their picture off the ground. So it was my job to get them comfortably in the harness, to get them situated, and I would pose them in the air and then run them up in the air on automation. So
Wow.
the same amount of protection that I got from the people that showed me Madison Square Garden is the same that I instilled in the people, so that they trusted me. First of all, if you don't develop that trust, that you
Oh, for sure.
then
Oh, yeah.
exactly, so I feel like those little components, and it's getting better, because but it's getting better because of the accents. That's the only problem. And
Yeah.
and they would wear their harness, they would wear their
Mm-hmm.
hard hat, and they would listen to the foreman. Yeah. Because if you think about it, the person holding the purse strings, they don't care about anybody that's involved in that. All they care about is when that building is finished, because
Right.
that's when they can start making money off of it. So that's nope.
Right.
And they will only be there for the paycheck. And that, if I had that amount of money, I would still do it, but I would do it a little differently because I've already been on the other side of it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the difference. If there was humanity to it, attached to it, people might be different when it comes to their investments, and the way that they push different people, and the way that they push to get things up faster than they're ready. That I mean, I'm assuming. I don't work construction, but excuse me, but I feel like that is one of the things. When you push too hard to go too fast, you're
Mm-hmm.
gonna miss a check. You're gonna miss a checking point of something.
Right.
And that's usually what fails. And that's usually where the problems are. And like I said, like if you go back to Titanic, billionaires of the time period, all they wanted was ROI as soon as that ship hit the water. They did
Mm-hmm.
not care one bit about any of those Irishmen who died, and any of the ones who lived putting it together. They just went onto the next
Right.
boat.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. For every
And I
million,
think,
they put in one life. So for every
yeah,
million they put in the Golden Gate Bridge, they put in that they were going to lose one person.
right.
Yeah. I just read that not too long ago, and I was like, oh my gosh, but they had a lot of immigrants that came over that had no other skills, but hey,
Right.
teach me how to put up, a bridge or a building, and I'll do it. And if you say, do this, and I'm afraid to do it, or I don't know if I want to do it, they would push you aside and find somebody else.
Right.
So
And I
yeah,
think that is what's wrong with society right now,
yeah,
is that everything has a dollar amount to it. And everybody who's investing in real estate, they don't care about anything about but the final product. They don't care about the build. They don't care about the concrete pour. They don't care about the rules and regulations that they have to follow through. They don't care about the inspections. All they care about is getting to that finish line and having a building that they can start making money off of. Right.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And that's where mistakes come in. And that's just like that's 9 times out of 10. That's if you follow the money, that's where the issues start and end. And that's unfortunate. But I always go back to that Titanic analogy because they were on like a scaffolding that had no railing. When
mm-hmm.
you think about it, have you gone
Yeah,
yeah, have you gone anywhere that doesn't have a railing 60 feet in the air? Of course not. Now, people are at least, if not more. But I always look at that because it was such a I mean, the whole story of the Titanic is a mess. But when you go back to just the beginning of the building of it, that shows you where construction is in the world today and how it's grown and how it still has miles to go to protect everybody involved.
so hey,
Oh,
yes,
sure,
yes.
sure. I mean, oh, great, thank you. Oh, that's. I mean, I really appreciate that. The beginning of the pandemic in March of 2020, my mom died of COVID. Over the course of the pandemic, I lost 30 people to COVID, 8 of which were relatives. An entire generation of my family was wiped out by COVID.
Wow.
And my mom had dementia, and she was in a nursing home. And so she also, now this goes back to my comedic roots. She also had the mouth like a truck driver. She also had a amazing human spirit, an amazing sense of humor. And this is my mom giving the finger to the nurse. And it's my book called #Shit My Mama Says, and it's available on Amazon. And it is just my interactions with my mom. Just like each page is one different interaction, and it has our story in the beginning, and like she has, um, it's great for anybody who's ever dealt with loss, who's dealt with a parent who has dementia, who's dealt with anybody who has dementia. And it's my love letter to my mom. It's my thank you for giving me life and letting me take care of you later in life. And my favorite quote. So I showed my mom a photo of a pregnant friend who was very pregnant. And my mom said, "Oh my God, she could go any minute." I said, "Yes, she's due next week." She said, "Oh no." I said, "She's overdue." And she said, "Oh, Bob, tell her to get a barbecue chicken wing and dangle it down there. It'll coax him out." It works for you. So, and so there's just little snippets. Yeah, here it is. Looking at a photo of a pregnant friend. Uh, oh, she could go anytime. Tell her to dangle a barbecue chicken wing down there. It'll coax him out. It works for you, Bob. So that's my mom. I I love chicken wings. Oh, and there's another barbecue chicken wings. My favorite. It's like, but my mom's sense of humor, my mom's coping mechanism was whenever there was tension in the room, she would drop a joke to change the energy of the room. And it was my coping mechanism. And that's why I was saying, like, in a complete flip, when I was first starting in stand up, I had no idea what I was doing. And I still had that coping mechanism, but I didn't know how to put it into a stand up routine. And so that's where my learning process came. And writing this book was very cathartic, but it also was very a way to connect to my mom. Every day I get to hear people chuckle about
Oh
Phil.
yeah.
And in that way, she's still alive. She's still with us.
Wow.
And I'm working on my second book, and that should be out hopefully next year. It's called Escape to Ravioli Mountain, a memoir in food. And it is a cookbook about growing up with my grandma in the 70s.
Oh,
So
nice. So
that's where I'm at right now. And being an artist, you got to do it.
where can people find your book, Bob?
It is available on Amazon. Also, you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Bobby Hedgeland Taylor, and my link tree has a link to it. But if you search for it on Amazon, you have to use the hashtag symbol, otherwise it won't come up. So it's hashtag shit my mama says.
All right. Hey, Bobby, I really appreciate you giving us your time, sharing the stories and again, like Corey said, we'd love to have you back and, we can go
Sure.
over more of the shit your mama
I'll
said.
ramble about rigging anytime.
All right.
Nice to have you. Nice to meet you guys too as well. Oh wait, one thing. Cartman wants to say goodbye. Did you both ever watch the Carol Burnett show?
Oh yeah, loved it. Loved it.
I'm so glad we had this time together, just to have a laugh and share a song. As we just get started and because we know it, seriously, you guys, comes the time we have to say so long. Screw you guys.
Excellent.
Absolutely. Like I said, anytime, it's my, I love the gift of gab, so I'm happy to do it. You too. Thanks, guys, for having me.
All right, be safe.
Okay. Oh, there you go.
Corey, where'd you go? Okay. I guess he's
All right.
done.
All right. You're gonna edit this shit, right?
Wow. Okay.
All right. Thanks so much for having me, David. I really appreciate it.
Oh, hey, it was so much fun. Thank you so much, Bob.
Great. And I'll be back anytime. Seriously,
All
just
right.
let me know.
I appreciate
All
it.
right. Take care.
All
Bye
right.
bye.
Bye-bye.